Okay, we're recording. Wonderful. All right, guys, how you doing? I am Dr. Ken Daniels, and I'm finally here with Greg Schnitzler after some technical difficulties. We apologize, but at least we'll be able to take the show and get it to you, and we'll get better at this every time. Greg, I appreciate your patience. I know that was trying, but we're all learning. We're all lifelong learners here. So thank you for coming, Greg. How you doing, Greg?
Not too bad, thanks.
Okay. So today, guys, we're here talking about Black capitalism, and we're dealing with Greg's book. You can see it here, Black Capitalism. And Greg has done a wonderful job explaining Black capitalism from 1971 to today, and give some insight into tomorrow. And the book is a wonderful book for sale. I believe you can get it on Amazon. Where else can you get the book, Greg?
Anywhere, any place that sells books, just about any place.
Okay. Greg, can you bring your camera down a little bit? Can't see all your face. Can you bring your camera down? Because can't see all your face.
Okay.
There you go, right there. Wonderful. So, Greg and I go back a long way. We worked together in the city of Richmond, Virginia, dealing with finance. Greg worked for the Virginia retirement system. I was a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University, and we had a great relationship. And Greg used to tell me stories of when he worked at Goldman Sachs back in the '60s. And I said, wow, that's pretty, Goldman Sachs is one of the premier financial institutions in the world. And he would tell me these stories about how, what it was like when, way back when, it's different how it is today in terms of the investment world, that there was no internet. I guess computers were starting to come in. I guess there were a few computers back then, I imagine. Not everybody had a computer.
No, that's for sure.
Both primary things were done by calculator and things like that. So audience, you have to realize we're talking about a different world, different time and place, but still, in order to understand your future, you have to understand your past. And that's what we're doing here today, talk about Black capitalism in terms of how Wall Street was integrated in the 60s to the 70s to the 80s, where this is now a hot button issue today in terms of we call DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's interesting that Greg found out that they had DEI back in the 1970s. So why don't you talk a little about that, Greg, about your experience of Goldman Sachs back in the 60s and what inspired you to write the book on Black capitalism?
Yeah, that's what got me going. Worked for Goldman Sachs and some other smaller firms. But basically what was the same, no matter which firm you're looking at on Wall Street at the time, it was all white. No black Americans, no Asian Americans at the time, purely white. Most senior executives, graduates of Ivy League schools, some good money there. And what I realized was I had introduced a couple of black friends of mine to for positions that were open at Goldman Sachs at the time. They had good interviews, everything looked fine, but they never got an offer. So at the same time that I was working at Goldman Sachs, I was attending St. John's University in Brooklyn, New York, going for my MBA. And my time came to write my MBA thesis. And I thought this was a perfect topic to use. Black Capitalism, 1971. And basically, what I saw was what I wrote was what I saw. Basically, no people of color on Wall Street. Basically, then fast forward 50 years going into today's time frame. Looking back, basically starting out from zero. So we've made some decent progress over the last 50 years. But of course, there's a long way to go. Some of the numbers that might make some sense. For instance, when it comes to unemployment rates, black people are still far ahead of white people as far as unemployment is concerned, both in good times
Mhm.
and in bad times. For instance, the ratio of black-white unemployment rate back in April 2020 was 1.27, and then during the pandemic, things got even worse. Apparently, black people were the first ones to let go. It jumped to 1.97, almost twice as many black people were.
Mhm.
Uh, let's keep in mind as we move forward that Black Americans make up about 13% of the total population. Keep that in perspective as to where we are. And
Mhm.
looking at some numbers today, while progress has indeed occurred, we're still far behind as far as where we should be. Nowhere near 30% as far as
Mhm.
attorneys are concerned, as far as doctors are concerned, as far as CEOs of corporate 500 companies are concerned.
Mhm.
You're looking at single-digit numbers rather than
Yeah, so
big.
there's still a ceiling. Even today, there's still a ceiling for black men and women in terms of cracking the executive suite.
Yeah, interesting enough, black women are doing better than black men as far as
Yes, it's
moving up.
interesting story. Yes,
Yeah, I mean that.
right. So that's nice. That's a nice broad background in terms of the overall economics and demographics per se. Let's talk a little specifically about education, which is one of the chapters in your book.
Yeah,
And I was dumbfounded when I read this chapter because I think of Wall Street. I know it has been integrated. I see other industries have been integrated, but still, even myself, I did a documentary on my hometown in terms of the educational system, and I'm just surprised how dysfunctional it is. In terms of one of the wealthiest nations in the world has many dysfunctional populations where education is a major problem in terms of achievement. So let's be clear here. It's not that we're saying that these are bad people. Is that we're talking about achievement here. Because now, as we go forward into the AI economy, it's going to find that those that are achievers and have come from high educational standards are going to be able to be adaptive and be successful in an economy which requires critical thinking, understanding numbers, working with computers, cooperation. So let's be clear here that we're not putting down any population here. We're just saying that we're trying to understand the state of things here. And Greg and I are just two concerned citizens. That's the title of this podcast here. It's just two concerned citizens concerned about the state of education in the United States of America. So with that said, Greg, I know that you wrote this chapter on education. Let me just give you a little prelude of Greg's book out. You guys need to go buy this book. It's a very good book. It's one of the more interesting books in it because the numbers is documented by data that gives a data point of where we are today in terms of Black capitalism. And I'm just going to chapter 4 in the book. And I'm going to set Greg up here because we're going to talk about the teacher shortage. Because we find that education is just a marketplace of people coming together, which are the students are demanding services, and the school system supplies that service. And so we're going to talk about in terms of a marketplace, where a marketplace should have rules and regulations and standards. And we find that when we talk about the American educational system, there's some shortcomings. So let me start off like that. So I'll do is we're just doing some basic fundamental reading. Education chapter, education. Bulletin, August 2022. America's public school system will be 400,000 teachers short for about 12% to start the school year. The 2022-23 school year, 3.1 million teachers need to be fully staffed. That's interesting. So let me start there. Then let me get Greg quote. Let me turn over to you, Greg. This is this. When I heard this quote, I was like dumbfounded. I was like, I'm a deep thinker, and it made me think about this quote. Let me read it first. You don't talk about it. I was shocked. It says the aim of public education is not to spread enlightenment at all. Not to spread enlightenment. It's simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level to breed a standard citizenry, to put down dissonance and originality. H.L. McKinnon. Is that McKinnon says right, Dan?
Yeah.
McKinnon. McKinnon. That is such a heck of a statement. I'm just going to be quiet, Greg, let you talk about it, and I'll come back and see what I think. I don't want to bias it any way you're what you think about it, but you go right ahead.
Well, I'll tell you, let me just start this morning, over the weekend, the weekend Wall Street Journal headline was that in Baltimore, but if it's Baltimore, it's pretty much all over the country, school boards are pushing for LGBTQ instructions in the classrooms.
Yeah.
Now, that's fine, but wouldn't it be more important to push reading, writing, arithmetic?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, these kids, let's just break up the school system into three parts. Public schools, number one, what we're concerned about here is inner city public schools that are basically attended by Black kids, mostly poor Black kids. Public schools in the outlying areas, and private schools.
Yep.
So those are the three basic. And regardless of which how you look at it from any aspect, as far as getting into college is concerned, grades, getting jobs are concerned after school, inner city public schools rank last. Period.
Right. Period. Period.
And the question is, what, if anything, can we do about it? Now, I don't see I don't see anyone, politicians on the left or on the right, making this a major issue. You know, about any issue that you talk about, fixing the quality of inner city public school education is not on anybody's list. And
not at all. They talk about all the other things, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Happens, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. I mean, we're going to be sit here 50 years from now and be the same subject. So that it has to come out centrally. Has to come out from the Oval Office. It can't be done state by state. Not teachers unions are not going to change it. School boards are not going to do anything about it. It has to be. There has to be some leadership to make.
So let's get some insight to our audience of why that be the case, or why you say it must be done at the central level. And let me me being the economist finance guy, let me break it down for our audience. You know, so even though Greg and I, we may be old, we know our stuff. So again, it goes back to my point, audience, that education is just a market. It's a marketplace. A marketplace has standards. And one of the reasons why markets are successful is that standards, they allow for it to be essentially a point of reference of things, that things become, basically, common. It becomes like a commodity, and you can price a commodity because it has a commodity price, because everybody knows the information associated with that particular state. So when you standardize the market, it allows it to be transparency, and the market can take into account quality and differences and offer a value for it. And there's a difference between value and price. But clearly public education has a value because students are learning, because the standards are set down by essentially from the federal government to the state government to the local government. That is the transparency. Just like any market, you take probably one of the most transparent markets there in the country is the municipal bond market. However, the municipal bond market, its pricing is not really set by the 50 states around the country. It's set by the federal government. The federal government sets standards for all bond markets, which is the treasury bond, and all other bonds in the country are priced off of that because the federal government gets transparent and close to the entire 50 states. And every other bond mimics the federal bond market, and so therefore they're just priced above or below it. It's that simple. If you have risk more than the federal government, you have to pay a premium. If you have less, you get a discount. But your standards are relatively similar in terms of the quality of what a bond is. A bond has a maturity, it has a date, it has certain types of cash flows, and so therefore the only difference is the risk associated with it, and it gets priced appropriate. The same thing should happen for a educational market. That what is it in terms of the federal government sets the standard. So if there was some in an ideal world, there would be a national school. It would be a national school, would have a national standard, and it would be set there, and every other school have to benchmark to that national school, which is how they do it in foreign countries. The best schools go to the national schools. They line up schools from 1 to 100, and the best students go to the national schools. Everybody else goes to the other schools. And your performance is essentially evaluated appropriately. That those who go to national school do well, go to the best colleges. Those that don't go to the worst. That's how it's done in Australia, it's done in Singapore. We're the only place that does it differently because of legacy. So now, that said, because we don't have a national educational standard, that is deferred to the states. And states do just about as possible to essentially infer some type of state standard that goes down to all the different localities. And even though there's a state school, states provide state financing, or they give some of that. And so therefore, states are able to, impose some level of standard, which is pretty much legislated. And some localities apply to it, some don't. And so therefore, those that don't get taken over, and those that apply to the standard pretty much are allowed to impose their local will. So with that said, Greg, what do you think what should we be thinking about? As you mentioned, that politicians are not on their radar in terms of this being the issue, and it's probably not going to happen because, as you mentioned, it has to come from that. So let me throw you a bone here. And say, so what about the board of education at the federal level? I'm trying to think of just a name for it. The Department of Education. What do you think about the role that the Department of Education is doing here? Because that's whose ball it is. It's supposed to be in their ballpark. What are they doing or not doing?
That should be their number one goal, to quote unquote fix America's public schools, especially inner city public schools.
Mm-hmm.
Just take a few minutes to point out how bad things are currently.
Okay.
And there's a score that is usually done annually, or every 3 years, that basically looks at the quality of education around the world. Where does America fit compared to other countries? And it's giving scores. And I think it's worthwhile to take a minute or two to look at some of those scores. And if that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what is. China is on top at 603. U.S. Asians, 549. U.S. whites, 521. Japan, 520. U.S. average among all is 492. The OECD average, 500. Russia, 486. U.S. Hispanic, 470. The country of Greece, 453. U.S. Black Americans, 436. And Panama, 365.
Wow.
Anyway, if that's not
365, oh my goodness, Jesus.
Well, yeah. And that obviously leads to results. And what are the results as household incomes are concerned around the U.S.? And again, this goes back 2 or 3 years, right, during the pandemic, but it's guaranteed it did not improve over the last 2 or 3 years. Indian American average annual income, Filipino Americans, 90, Chinese Americans, 82, white Americans, 76, median income in the US, 69, Hispanic Americans, 56, African Americans, 45. And of course, this is a result, a direct result of what we've just heard a few minutes ago. And again, education is the primary factor when we look at annual incomes earned by heads of household. All educational levels, 69,000, less than ninth grade, 29,000, some high school, 29,000, high school equivalent, 47,000, some college, 60, associate degree, 68, bachelor's, 106. But you won't get there with the kind of grades that these kids have coming out of high school. So, I mean, it's
yeah.
And
well, let's go back to this is one of my areas of study. So I like it when you say that. It brings me back to some research I did back on the wealth gap, the income gaps. There's a difference between the two. But you pointed out. I mean, they are correlated. Clearly, if you have a low, if you have a low income gap, you're probably going to or if you have a large income gap, you're probably going to have a large wealth gap in terms of African Americans, in terms of the number being large relative to whites.
Right.
But I found it interesting because this is something that's been studied for centuries. Wealth creation, which is really what Black capitalism is really all about in terms of how do you become educated. It's really simple. You're born. Everybody's born, comes into the world equally. 2 legs, two eyes, right? So we all have 2 legs, 2 eyes. We all come in, but then all of a sudden, we all have a different environmental experience. That some go to quality schools, some go to bad schools. That's the kind of story that we're telling here. And that's where the major segmentation comes, that it's not so much that we believe that there's any type of, this bell curve stuff for Hitlerism and all that kind of stuff here. We're proposing that the inputs are relatively the same, but, it's not going through the same processes. And I know that was true for me, that I went to inner city school. I'm going to talk about, let me personalize it. I went to inner city school, and I was good at math and science, but I was a horrible writer. My English teachers were horrible. When I got to college, I saw how people were writing. I was like, oh my God, these kids can write. They knew preposition. I knew the basics, but they clearly gotten a superior training in English language, which is more adapted than I had gotten in high school. And it followed me my entire career. I turned out to be a decent writer, but I was never a great writer because I never had the basics and foundation. I'm just being very honest, I had to catch up, It took me years to catch up to find out that people are, espousing the language at a level 4 or 5 times above where I was. That was embarrassing, I would sit there and I had to cover up my weakness, And that's what we're saying with these kids, that they do the same thing. They come in there, they're behind, but what do? They cover it. Not only do they cover it up, the system covers it up, and that leads to these very large income and wealth gaps we're talking about because the marketplace, the workforce development recognizes that, as we know, and those that have skills get jobs, and those that don't have skills struggle.
Yeah,
and that gets to another thing that I hope we could talk about, is that should we have training programs that not everybody's college material, where we get into essentially we call it apprenticeships and things like that for trade schools. This is a very large subject. Should we have more discussion on trade schools and colleges? Not be quiet, but the things that you espouse in your chapter are just amazing, because it goes all the way down to the Army. And I hope we'll jump that next. The Army is no longer the employer of last resort. Kids can't even get into the Army now because of the skill set. So I think I said enough. I think you kind of get my view on this.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what's happening around the country, I just have 2 examples here. Public schools tend to bring down the quality of the education rather than raise it up for kids who need to be raised up. Just 2 examples.
Right.
It happens all over the country. The Cherry Creek School District in Colorado, for instance, has announced that beginning in 2026, it will cease to recognize a high school class valedictorian because it is outdated and everyone's the same anyway. Um, Similarly, the Barrington Public School District in Barrington, Rhode Island, decided that beginning in 2023, it would eliminate high school honor classes.
Wow.
After outraged parents complained that this would risk their children's ability to get financial aid for college, did the school agree to resume modified honors classes. As one angry father put it, if you guys believe in equity, then pick an average or below average dentist and see what you get. In May 2022, the school committee voted that it was bringing back honors in English as well as honors with distinction in social studies. That just shows you
Right.
the way that these schools are trying to go, unless there's some pushback, which there wasn't.
Right.
For instance, it's going to happen. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
they're going to lessen the quality of the education and bringing smart kids down rather than lifting kids that have difficulties lifting them up. Simple as that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because when I did my documentary East Orange school system, basically when you have a certain level of dysfunction, if you can't tease out those kids, then it pulls everybody down. So the whole point is that they found that they can't tease out the honor students, So therefore, rather than trying to tease them out and have to separate them, give them something better, say, let's just bring everybody back down to the average. That's basically what happened. So it's kind of what it's called price discrimination. That if you can't segment the population out to different levels of skills and that everybody looks like it's a blob, then you just go with the blob. And the reason for that is that now these kids, they can't read and write. So there's no reason they can't tell. If a person can't read, you don't know what they know. You think all these kids can't read. So they think they're all the same because they can't read.
Yeah.
Or they can't, if they can read, they can't read at a proficient level to distinguish themselves. They can't write at a certain to distinguish themselves. They can't do math at a level to distinguish themselves. It used to be back when you not that there was certain one or two students that they were so good at reading, writing, and math that they distinguished themselves, that they were different and better, and so therefore they deserve to be placed in the higher level classes. That's not happening anymore. They're not able to read, write, and distinguish themselves at performance to say that, okay, that there's enough of them that we should pull out 4, 5, 6, 7 kids and put them in a separate class because they can achieve at a higher level and we should give them the opportunity.
Yeah,
that's how I see it. It's that that now you might have one kid. You're not going to have an honors class just for one kid.
Yeah, what I'm really concerned about is that things are going to get much worse before they get better. The reason I'm saying that is AI, artificial intelligence. Jobs that are basically held by less educated people, whether it be working in restaurants, driving trucks, driving buses, those jobs are going to go away.
Yeah, that's right.
They're going to go away. And I've looked at some projections for unemployment, 3, 5, 10 years from now, double digits.
Right.
Going to 10, 15%. No one talks about that today.
Right. Well, today's news item was that Amazon is now going to reduce their workforce because they came to the statement that AI has made them much more efficient that they're going to have a workforce reduction program.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see this already because AI is allowed them to do basic functions.
Yep, exactly.
It can be done by robots, or it can be done by we're not even talking about robotics yet, but again, that's part of it. That the automation, let's just call it automation. The automated process has now led to a certain level of efficiency that allows you to reduce the workforce.
It's going to affect you with a good education, even with a good, you may be subject, but much less people coming out of public schools. and I
Right.
mean that is going to be
Yeah. Well,
one day
and
somebody
even
talk about it.
I did. I even embrace AI now. I didn't think I was going to be an AI guy, but I am now an AI guy. I'm like all for it. Like, the first thing I do when I do something, what does AI have to say about it? And can I use AI tools? Because not that it will get me all the way home, but it will get me 75% there, and I can do the rest of the 25%. And that now, so that saves 75% of my time. So now I'm much more efficient. So if it took me
Yeah.
a year to write a book before, it now only takes me 3 months. It's like, so that's good because the AI will write 75% of the book for you in terms of the stuff that's mundane anyway. You're not going to be care about the mundane stuff anyway. The dot the i's and cross the t's and all that kind of stuff, and make sure that the sentences are properly. So if you got somebody do that for you, you still got to put the content in there. But in terms of pure grammar, there's rules for grammar. AI is perfect for that.
Yeah.
So
The question that's being raised is, could a lot of money, a lot of additional money, could it fix the quality of the education that kids get? And one
yeah.
one one example that's in the book is back in 2010. Then a young 26-year-old Mark Zuckerberg announced on the Oprah Winfrey Show that he would donate $100
Mhm.
million to the public schools in Newark, New Jersey. After they had met
Right.
and discussed the Newark public school situation with Mayor Cory Booker, who's, by the way, I think a senator today, at an Allen
Mhm.
Company investment conference. And
Mhm.
how was that $100 million spent, and what was the result of the $100 million? I'm pretty much quoting here. The money had to be spent and matched with another $100 million. So a number of other billionaires stepped in and donated the matching portion. So we had $200 million to work with.
Mhm.
Uh, the funds were mostly spent on a new union agreement that incorporated test-based accountability and weaker tenure protection for the expansion and operating support for charter schools and for various consultants. The result of these donations and reorganizations is that compared to other low-income municipalities in New Jersey, Newark's test scores had gone from 39th to 78th percentile, so a huge improvement, from below
Mhm.
average to considerably above average. High school graduation rate rose from 63% in 2011 to 77% in 2018. The question is, how long would that money last? Is this a permanent improvement, or is it going slowly down to where it used to be 10 or 15 years ago? And unfortunately,
Mhm.
what we're seeing is that's what's been happening. Once
Right.
it has been spent, things
Well,
slowly
so
go.
reversion to the mean.
Yeah,
Reversion to the mean. After that.
yeah, yeah,
We should be laughing about it, but that's so it's amazing how this is classic economics, right?
yeah. It really is. Yeah, it would take $100 million in every school district for 10 years, and then another 100 million. I mean, the money is not there.
Not there, no. So,
And,
well, it's funny because that's basically home for me. I'm from East Orange, which is right next to North, so I'm very familiar with the school system and the problems and uh, just the culture. I think to me more than anything, it's the culture of the education there relative to other places. Um, it's runs. In some ways, they do a good job. I would say that, given the obstacles that they face. We're not talking about the greatest inputs coming in there. You got to be fair to them. A lot of single parents. You know, uh, not a lot of parental involvement in terms of the kids after school, like fact, somebody told me a story. I was like shocked. They told me said that they came from for some reason they had to go home to East Orange and they had to bring their kid with them and they had come from a pretty good school district where there's a lot of parental involvement and they went to the parent teacher night in essentially East Orange and they were shocked. There was like four parents there. It's like there was no parents at the parent teacher conference. They said they was appalled about it. Like it's such an eye opening thing that you can't believe that you go to any place that's like parent teacher night. That's like it's like the hottest night in any town. And it's like packed because like it's a chance for parents get to voice their opinion, right? You got like in Richmond, that's like a big night, right? It's like the parents are teeing off. Like, what are you talking about? My kid can't do this. It's like I mean they involved. This chance for them to speak one night at this is packed. Now, why'd you take away the robotics class? They all over it, every issue, you know. It's like, and here that these other cities, there's nobody there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's such a glaring difference. It's like, why you got to be kidding? The parents are not even there,
yeah,
and they may not be there for good reason. They might be working. I don't know. I don't have to say that, but they're not at the parent teacher conference in these urban districts in
yeah,
general. And we're not making this stuff up. That's I first hand evidence of that. I taught it. It's like unbelievable.
yeah. But but yeah, we've been talking about all the negative things that are going on. Once in a while, actually, there's you can point to a success story, which not enough people are paying attention to. So there are success
Hmm.
stories out there, and if they
Yeah.
can be sort of multiplied in numbers, I mean, just to give you one example, uh, un- until 1969, there were no black companies that were publicly traded.
Bring your camera down again. Let's go back up. Bring your camera down a little bit. Can't see your mouth. Get the camera, yeah,
Oh,
a little bit down. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
not one company that was publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Yeah. Today, you can get a handful. The
Right,
first one uh, bears mention because it's a company that most people would recognize. Allen and Company, a excellent brokerage firm, uh, took the company called Parks Sausages public. It's
hmm yeah. Very well known. Yeah,
very well
good
known.
sausage. I've had a few. I've
Yeah,
had a few.
yeah. Uh, you know, they brought this company public. Uh, People knew the company. They were sponsoring radio ads for the New York Giants football games, and mostly important, it was an excellent product. An excellent product. It
Right.
was very,
Yeah.
very successful. Very, very successful. Uh, so that was the first black company that went public on the New York Stock Exchange. Uh, and since then, uh, some have followed, uh, but again, percentage-wise, it's still a very, very low number uh,
Right.
today. So, but once in a while, I do like to pick at some positives because there are
Yeah.
positives that you can.
You know,
Uh,
you make a very good point. We shouldn't poo-poo everything because there is some
yeah, I mean,
gravitas towards, you know, and there is. Let's say this: there is talent in these schools. It's not. We're not saying that there's not talent.
yeah,
It's. But the key, I think, the point we're making is that because there is talent there, we need to cultivate this talent so that we can have a workforce for the 20. I guess we're in the 21st century. I'm getting old. We're already here. It's like
on the 21st,
we,
yeah. Uh,
we're here. Not preparing for it. We got to get ready for this next. I don't know what the next triennium is going to be, but clearly, math is a major component, and maybe I like maybe we could talk about this. I think the Army story is really interesting because that's kind of uh, places everyone knows the U.S. Army. In terms
yeah,
of they just had this big parade, and you're looking at. I remember back in the day, it used to be that maybe not the brightest guy in the neighborhood would go in the Army. That's kind of That was kind of the story, that maybe they didn't go to college, therefore they went to the army. That's no longer the story.
Well, you can really move up in the Army, Navy, Air Force. If you fly airplanes, you must have good
Yeah,
do that. The question
yeah.
is
Just the army has a bunch of, they take some of the best and the brightest. Now they recruit some of the best and brightest.
exactly. Yeah. So uh, you know, it's
I think that story that you told about the army test score is pretty relevant. So I don't know if you want to find that and go into it. About the when I was reading there about there's a name for the test that they took about 30% of people that graduated from high school. So the high schools are saying that they are quote unquote proficient, and 30% of those people fail the army test. That shows you how tough that army test is.
yeah. And even if you get in, your career path is limited.
Yeah.
They know exactly what your scores are, and you're not going to go to flight school.
Hmm.
You're not going to go. You'll have a job, but
Right.
you never become an officer or move up the chain of command. So that's the problem.
Yeah.
You might get
Yeah.
in,
Everybody.
you might sneak in with a less than
Hmm.
great score, but you're limiting yourself
Yeah.
as in private industry as well.
It's funny because everybody knows pop culture and the movies, Officer and the Gentleman.
Yeah,
But that's kind of Richard Gere. He was a sharp little cookie. He wasn't no dummy.
yeah,
So that's kind of what we're talking about. All these things play out in real life. But let me find this paragraph that you actually talk about. That is because you got this thing here in terms of you got a bunch of, and that's why folks you need to go out and get read. But it's a bunch of good clinical data. We call this clinical. It's a clinical study. It goes out and gets data, it looks at it in a very uh, friendly way that talks about numbers in terms of what is happening in terms of the assessment of education in terms of its impact on Black capitalism. We're not just talking about education in a vacuum. We say that education matters to Black capital, and if we made a more dedicated effort in educating the minority workforce, there would be more capital. There'd be a return on investment. Somewhere down the line that these people would become successful. They would start businesses and companies and generate taxes, and we have better performing school districts, and crime rates would come down. It would lead to a better society. I mean, there's evidence for that. I mean, that's the whole point of that first quote, which I'm dumbfounded by, is that it's not until lightness, public education is not until light in terms of producing some great mind that's going to make you know, a rocket, or the next great invention. That's not the purpose of public education. It's to essentially set a minimum standard. It sets a minimum standard that these people won't be bums, won't be vagrants. And so if I hire somebody from public education, it shows you how they thought about it back then, because there's clearly a distinction between public and private education. But he's saying that we just want a standard of citizenry, that this is a local guy that we can count on, that he's going to pay his taxes, he's not going to do crime, he's not going to be at the bar every night of the week,
right.
right? And he's going to, so therefore he's going to give you a certain level of production. But let me read this quote and then I'll turn it over to you again. In his 2020 report, Ready Willis and Unable to Serve Mission Readiness, a group of retired military and civilian leaders found that 1 in 4 young people between 17 and 24 does not have a high school diploma. About 30% of those who do, not those who don't, but 30%. So clearly, if you don't, idea that just that's got an issue. But the 30% of who do, state reports still fail the armed forces qualification test, the entrance test required to join today's U.S. military. The Education Trust, a Washington-based education research and advocacy organization, released a report shut out of the military. Today's high school education doesn't mean you're ready for the army, and that's what we're talking about here. Because you get the army is a different army than when I came up. It's totally different. report dated April 4th, 2000, was based on a sample of 350,000 high school graduates from 2004 to 2009 who took the Army's Service Vocational Aptitude Battery test that assesses candidates' aptitude for enlistment. Four subgroups make up the test: math, knowledge, arithmetic, reasoning, word knowledge, and paragraph comprehension. According to the national report, 23 to 23% of the test takers failed to achieve at least 31 of a 99 percentile score. Wow. The minimum qualifying score. More than twice as many as black as white absolutely failed to qualify. So again, blacks, what up the bottom? And I'm black. I'm not, it's like, gotta call duck a duck. Can't put it in the closet. You know, that's just how I feel about it. Because if we dress it, they'll get better.
Yeah.
Those who did often had lower scores, which likely excluded them from higher level training. Because say that's the power of Greg's book. That he takes a very clear cut example of clinical data, puts in perspective of the overall problem, and from that you can draw your own conclusion. He's not drawing a conclusion. He's just giving you the evidence. And from that evidence, you know, if you come out saying that, well, there's no problem, then you really are you're putting your head in the sand. There's a problem here. I've just said enough, Greg. You go ahead and take it and run with it. You know, I just think that what you've done is such a great job. I wish I could have participated, but you really did a great job of these examples are so powerful.
Yeah, let's go back to the 1970s. There was a push, especially when the President Johnson was in office, push to try to solve the problems of the ghetto and to help Black Americans elevate.
Yeah, he did.
Yes, and you know it did continue into the 1980s, but unfortunately, not everybody agreed with that. You know, and let me give you an example. There were those who advocated that business only needed to attempt to maximize its profits, and without social responsibilities, found an eloquent spokesman in Milton Friedman. Those who've been that was someone that people listened to.
Yeah, I remember good old Milton. He's a pure market guy. Yeah.
Yeah, in the September 13th article of the New York Times, he says social responsibility of business is to increase profits, period. Is an artificial person in this sense may have artificial responsibilities, even in a vague sense. Has only direct responsibilities to executives, have only responsibility to his employers.
Mm-hmm.
That responsibility is to conduct the business in accordance with their desire, which generally will be to make as much money as possible and don't worry about, helping other people move up the chain. So in short, what he was saying is
I got some hard.
Yeah, so a company is made up of employees who act as agents for the benefit of the owners.
It's interesting you bring that up because that takes me back to my grad school days when I was studying this whole thing of Keynesianism and different types of market philosophies and I branched out when I went from economics to finance. I got a strong concentration in finance, and that's why I started to find out that that this whole viewpoint of the marketplace and responsibilities is that there's at that time business was actually had a different viewpoint than Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman was an economist, and he pretty much believed in just pure markets. But at that time, there was a lot of business researchers who saw that corporations had labor issues and had to become involved in society more, else they weren't going to get the workforce that they needed. So they recognized the problem before some of the economists did because they were at a more micro level, and they saw that they had to get a larger pool. And I think you can maybe take this back to your Goldman Sachs days, and maybe that's how this whole started for you. That Goldman Sachs saw that they needed to spread a wider net to get the talent they needed to become the organization that they wanted to be, and that you just couldn't sit back and do nothing. So Milton Friedman's sitting back there high up on the perch saying that, well, the job of business is to make profits. And so therefore just step back. But if you do, you're not going to get those profits because you're not going to have the people that actually can accomplish the job.
Right.
And, and so when I got to the business school, I was shocked to find that, wow, these guys, they saw that some of these CEOs there, they recognized that they had to diversify their workforce before some other disciplines did because they were right there on the firing line. And maybe you could talk about your Goldman Sachs experience and how that came about, and maybe talk a little about DEI and all that. You got to say that Goldman Sachs was a great example there. That they disagree with Milton Friedman, right?
Yes, but there were really companies even then who did not agree with with Milton Friedman, and just two
Right.
companies that I mentioned in my book that are still around today. For instance, Xerox and IBM. They went the other route. They did make sure that there was an equal opportunity for all employees to be hired.
Right. Yeah, Xerox came to Fairfield. They were very progressive at that time. Xerox was very, very progressive in terms of workforce development.
At the time, it was a much bigger company as today. It's still around, but not to the extent that it was then. Of course, IBM, speaks for itself. And even today, these companies are. So there's always been some positive with all the negatives. There's always some positive that we need to point out as well, basically. So,
but it's interesting how even though it turns out to be, it all comes back to education. Even though we're not talking about business and profits, it's still training. Training is education, and so it's we kind of we don't want to. We don't want to just have bookworms or that's a common criticism that you give as an academic that you're not applied, that you know a lot of book knowledge but you're not able to apply it to a business sense, therefore you're not relevant or it's not. Whereas once you get into the workforce, you see that is now an applied type of education, but it's still the foundation is still education, still reading, writing, and math. So,
yeah, and talking about investments, D&I, some mutual funds have been established that make sure that the companies that they invest in apply DE&I.
Right.
They would not invest in any company, and that's beginning. Some companies are stepping away from that. One example, one of the ETFs, electronic traded funds, states that it strives to take politics out of investing. Invest in alignment with personal values and focus on high returns for our investors. We are not supporters of environmental, social, and governance, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or similar fashionable investment criteria that place ideology, social, or political goals ahead of our investors' financial interests. So there's people,
Got to bring your camera back down again.
Huh?
You got to put your camera back down again. Your camera back down again. Yeah. This keeps going up.
If you believe in D&I, then invest in mutual funds that do not abide by that. But it's up to you. If you want to help, you can use your profits towards that end, your personal profit, rather than let the fund focus on it.
Right.
So that was.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you mentioned that because if our audience, DE&I is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
This comes about because we now know that some pension funds now have, I probably don't know the right word for it, but it's going to more social, what's the word for it? I know, I forget this, essentially social,
well, maybe.
acceptance. There's a word for it. I'm missing what it is, but essentially they want to make sure that companies They meet certain standards of meeting a social and economic and environmental agenda. It's not just social; it's environmental also. We'll make sure that you're not polluting. Like, for example, back in the day when General Electric was polluting, you know, apply it was pressure put on General Electric to clean up some of the stuff there because it was coming from. That's a market discipline. That's a market discipline approach that they're going to someone to invest said, well, look, we want to invest in you, but our investors are not crazy about investing because you're polluting the Hudson River.
Right.
They're not like that. So therefore, they're not going to invest in you because you're not
Yeah. Or even cigarettes.
manufacturing with an
Even
environmentally friendly.
yeah.
What's that?
Even cigarettes.
I couldn't hear you. Oh
Some.
yeah, yeah, cigarette. Yes, another thing.
Yeah. So
So the social norms, the social norms that were deemed to be taboo, the market put pressure on them to be changed. So pollution was one, cigarettes was another, and then it came over to be the workforce development to
right.
our audience that these things just didn't happen by chance. It came from the marketplace. That the marketplace said, "Look, we want to have these things be addressed, and if you don't do that, we're not going to invest in you." Which means that billions of dollars were withheld from them, and that's what we call market discipline.
Right. Right.
Now, there's a difference between market deficit and market influence, but the discipline is that that somehow if you don't do this, then we're going to slap you on the wrist, which will essentially raise your rates and lower your prices so that you will be impacted financially. There's a financial impact of this whole thing of DEI. That's the point I'm making, that you're making. That some of this came from pension funds, some of it came from trade associations. So it wasn't just by chance that all these DEIs across the country that popped up just came out of the blue. No, there was some structure why how to happen.
Right. Right.
Not that
I
it's
don't.
going the other way. It's kind of interesting that it's going the other way. That there's been a little bit of backlash.
Right.
It'd be interesting if that comes back again because if we keep continuing to have poor workforce development problems, then somehow this is going to have to be addressed again. That we're not having a long-term, proper conversation about education and performance and workforce development, which
Right.
is we know we're going to be back to this issue long beyond you and I being here.
Absolutely.
It's not going to go away just overnight.
Ken, I don't know how much time you got left, but one thing I don't want to miss, because it pretty much covers everything that we talked about.
So go ahead. We got time. I think.
It's not in 2020. There was a congressional Joint Economic Committee in Congress, and what came out of it was, I think, extremely important to mention. First of all, about 10 or 12 bullets, and I'll quickly go over them. I think that pretty much covers everything, where we've been, where we are, and hopefully where we're going to be going. Bullet number one: despite significant economic progress over the past decades, Black Americans experience far worse economic conditions than whites or the population as a whole. Historically, the unemployment rate for Black Americans has been approximately twice the rate of whites. That is the case today, which back in 2022, 6% for Black workers, 3.1 for whites. The difference in the unemployment rate for Black and whites shrinks for college graduates. However, in the current strong economy, the unemployment rate is 59% higher for Black Americans. During the majority of the past 50 years, Black Americans have experienced unemployment rates that were where they experienced by the entire population would be seen as recessionary. Black workers have been disproportionately hurt by the overall decline in union membership and the decreasing power of unions. The typical Black household earns a fraction of white households, just 50 cents for every dollar. The gap between Black and white annual household incomes is about $29,000 per year. Black Americans are over twice as likely to live in poverty as white Americans. Black children.
Wow.
Oh, my battery is running low.
Yeah.
Black children are over twice as likely to live in poverty as white children. Median wealth of Black families, 17,000, less than 1/10 of white families, 171. The wealth gap between Black and whites increases with education. Much less than 42% of Black families own their own homes, compared to 3/4 of white families. Anyway, my phone is running. I'm gonna lose you in a minute. I have to plug it in.
Yeah, you're getting.
Huh? Okay, I'm back. I'm plugged in, but I'm not at my desk anymore. Hello? You back? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I hear you. Okay. So yeah, we're coming up on. Why don't you give us a summary to finish out? And I think we had a nice couple of. I think got over an hour of talking there. So why don't you give
Yeah.
us your final thoughts? 'Cause I think you're running low on that battery.
Well, my final thoughts are they're not final. I mean, this is going to be an issue that's going to be with us for a long time period. Where we are today, a huge improvement over when I first looked at this 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the numbers that I've shared with you, some of the numbers that are in the book, tell us that unless some drastic changes occur very quickly, starting with our public school systems, people are going to be standing here and talking about this subject 50 years from now, and Black Americans are still going to be lagging far behind the economy as a whole. I mean, that's so it's up to every citizen to push for change now, not tomorrow.
Right. Well, Greg, I would say as a Black American, I'll say thank you for writing this book. I think
Oh,
hopefully someone out there will see this. Hope someone out there, as when they post this on the web, someone out there in uh, the world will see that and give you your due recognition. And hopefully that will help with first book sales. Again, I want to say to our audience that this is Gregory Schnitzler's book is Black Capitalism, and you can find it on pretty much any bookstore in America. If you go in the bookstore and say, I want Black Capitalism, 1971 Today, Tomorrow by Greg Schnitzler, they'll find it for you. You'll be able to get a nice product. But more than that, I think you guys should maybe give some thought to the topic that Greg has put out here and do something about it, because that's the whole thing is that it's going to lead to some type of action plan. Daniels Foundation for Impact Investments and Development. And you can find it at Daniels Education for Inner City Youth by doing reading, writing, and math. I'm doing some other things. We do a lot of community service in terms of trying to just get back to the basics of a sound education system, of trying to fill gaps. So we go into schools and we try to plug the gaps in terms of teachers can't do this, and we try to fit in. If it's But so, audience, I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. I enjoyed it, Greg. It was pretty eye opening. I had fun. We're going to do this again. It'll be a series. We'll do it whenever Greg is available. Then we'll come back. We'll do another chapter. It's got a bunch of topics in here. Let me just kind of go through them because again, so show you what we're at with this. That we just did one chapter, and Greg has essentially 11 chapters. Education was chapter 6. I'll just give you an idea of some of the stuff here. I won't do all of them, but he does reparations. Chapter 10 is about reparations. Why don't you tell us what's the 1619 project? I'm not familiar with it. Give an idea. What's the 1619 project, Greg?
It's a book that is also available, and it basically it argues that certain things have to change again today to bring Black people up to
Mm-hmm.
par. And she had discussed some of the things that should be done today. And it's very controversial, but it's a good book
Okay.
also to read. I've got it. So
Okay. All right. So maybe I'll take a look at it. We can just discuss that. I think that'd be interesting for our audience. And then he
yeah,
talks about Black capitalism,
I've got
Black
one
owned business.
chapter. I've got one chapter devoted to that book. So
Right.
yeah,
Talks about Black capitalism, Black owned business, minority unemployment and poverty, investment banking, Black capitalism. That's interesting. The state of Black capitalism, a report card. I think maybe we should do that next. I think that's really important. And where are we in the report card? We did education today. The Black professional. Maybe we could bring another person into discussion of some Black professional. They can give us their viewpoint. That would be interesting. Of some
yep,
current young Black employees out there say, well, this is what we did. Are we off? Get their viewpoint. McDonald's, maybe bring some McDonald's, a world leader in food service. Talk about the 1619 reparations.
right.
So, folks, this is a very well thought out document. Greg, you'd be commended for it. I hope you get your due. That's not why we write it, but, but you hope to get some due. So hopefully somebody will see this and get a little push. And I think we had a good talk here today, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. It's good to see you. Look good.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you.
I've come back. I made a bounce back. I got some energy. I got one more bullet in me for to do something good. So
Okay, good.
try to do it. The foundation. And I got a bunch of. You should take a look at my YouTube channel. I got a lot of stuff on my YouTube channel. That's what's going to be when you're out there. Take a look at some other stuff. And I got a lot of good stuff out there. And this interview will be out there, so I'll send you the link for that. And Mr. Schnitzler, thank you very much today. It's good seeing you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Yep. And I'll be in touch. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Yep. Bye bye.
You too.
Yep.